start retreating! Elena.
Don't be stupid. Kova!
Fall back.
Negative, Command. I cannot confirm extraction coordinates. The package is compromised. Sergeant Kova, you are greenlit to retreat to Rally Point Zulu. Do not engage. That is a direct order. The wind shear is 40 knots. A shot is mathematically impossible. Math changes when you're the variable, sir. Anna, don't be stupid. You're alone out there. The thermal sweep shows 20 hostiles moving on the ridge. If you break silence, you're dead. The radio crackled, the sound of heavy panic breathing filling the earpiece. It wasn't hers. It was her spotter, miles away, bleeding out. Command, tell Jones to keep his head down. I'm not retreating. Kova, you are physically incapable of holding that ridge. Fall back. She looked through the scope, her eyelashes rimmed with frost. The crosshairs danced violently in the gale. Her heart rate was the only thing slower than the freezing wind. They think I broke, sir. They think I left him. Anna, let them believe it. Klickeningfon, 72 hours earlier, forward operating base. Keystone, or northern border. The hangar air at Bagram Airfield tasted of jet fuel and stale coffee. It was a thick, industrial scent that coated the back of the throat, but Sergeant Anna Kova didn't mind. It helped mask the metallic tang of anxiety sitting on her tongue. She sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, her small frame almost entirely obscured by the disjointed components of her M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. To the casual observer, she looked like a child trying to assemble a puzzle meant for a giant. Her wrists were thin, her skin pale, and her eyes, a startling, watery gray, seemed too large for her face. You're packing heavy, Kova. The voice boomed from above. Anna didn't flinch. She slid the bolt carrier group into place with a satisfying shuck click before looking up. Captain Lucas Jones stood over her, his shadow stretching across her equipment. He was everything she wasn't, broad, loud, and radiating the kind of kinetic energy that usually preceded a bar fight. He held a manifest tablet in one hand, tapping it against his thigh with an impatient rhythm. Standard loadout, sir, Anna said, her voice soft but steady. Standard for a linebacker, maybe, Jones retorted, squatting down to eye level. He wasn't trying to be cruel. Anna knew that. He was trying to be practical. In his eyes, she was a math equation that didn't balance. We're rucking up to 12,000 feet. The air up there is thin enough to starve a marathon runner. I've seen your medical file, Sergeant. Cardiac arrhythmia, one bad palpitation on the ridge, and you're not just a casualty, you're an anchor. Anna's fingers paused on the objective lens cover. The ghost program wasn't on her file. To Jones, the arrhythmia was a defect. To her, it was a biological hack, a way to drop her heart rate so low that she could shoot between beats, even under duress. The waiver was signed by Colonel Smith, sir, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. I can carry the weight, Jones scoffed, grabbing one of her magazines. It's not about the waiver. It's about the reality of gravity. You weigh what? 110 soaking wet? He tossed the magazine back onto her pile. I need shooters who can haul a wounded man out of a kill zone. If I go down, Kova, are you going to carry me? It was the question they always asked. The metric of worth in the infantry wasn't how well you could think, but how much dead weight you could lift. If you go down, Captain, Anna said, finally locking eyes with him, it means I missed, and I don't miss. Jones stared at her, a muscle in his jaw twitching. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant whine of a C-130 taxiing on the runway. He didn't like the answer, but he couldn't fault the logic. Check your gear again, Jones grunted, standing up. We wheels up in 20. And Kova, if you lag behind, I leave you behind. My ROE, rules of engagement, for this terrain is speed, no stragglers. Understood. He walked away, barking orders at the rest of the team, 6 men who moved with the easy camaraderie of predators. Anna watched them. They were checking each other's plates, joking about the local food, slapping shoulders. She was an island in their sea. She turned back to her pack. She had 5 pounds of allowance left before hitting the critical fatigue threshold. Jones would expect her to pack extra water or emergency rations, items for survival. Anna reached into her locker and pulled out 3 extra boxes of 300 Winchester Magnum ammunition. They were heavy, dense bricks of lead and brass. She opened her ruck and shoved the MREs, meals ready to eat, aside, dumping the food to make room for the bullets. Hungry work ahead? Anna looked up to see Corporal Tex Grady, the team's heavy weapons specialist, watching her. He wasn't sneering like Jones, but the pity in his eyes was worse. "Something like that," Anna murmured, zipping the bag shut. "You know Jones is just riding you because he's worried, right?" Tex said, leaning against a crate. "Last sniper we took up the Hindu Kush didn't make it back. HAPE, high-altitude pulmonary edema. Lung fluid drowned him." "I have good lungs," Anna said, hoisting the pack. It was heavy, the straps digging instantly into her trapezius muscles. She suppressed the grunt of effort. "Yeah, well," Tex looked at her small boots. "Just stay low, Viper. We'll clear the path. Stay low, stay quiet, stay out of the way." Anna adjusted the rifle sling across her chest. The weight was comforting. It was the only thing in this world that treated her fairly. The wind didn't care about her gender. Gravity didn't care about her size. A bullet went exactly where the math told it to go. She walked toward the transport ramp, the heavy pack threatening to pull her backward with every step. She forced her breathing to rhythmize. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Jones was at the ramp, counting heads. As Anna passed, he didn't nod. He just checked a box on his tablet. "Load up!" Jones yelled over the engine roar. Anna stepped into the darkness of the aircraft's belly. She found a seat in the darkest corner, away from the red tactical lights. She closed her eyes and began to lower her pulse. They called her weak. They called her a liability. She would let them believe it until the first shot rang out. The Mountain did not fight fairly. It didn't care about tactics, technology, or valor. It only understood gravity and cold. At 11,000 feet, the air was a thin, ragged thing that refused to fill the lungs. Sergeant Anna Kova felt the hypoxia gnawing at the edges of her vision, a subtle graying of the world that narrowed her focus to the boots of the man in front of her. "Pick up the pace, we're burning daylight," Captain Jones's voice crackled over the comms, breathless but commanding. Anna gritted her teeth, forcing her legs to piston upward. The snow was deceptive here, a crust of hard ice concealing pockets of soft powder that swallowed boots up to the knee. Every step was a negotiation with the terrain. Her ruck, heavier than regulation due to the unauthorized ammunition, dug into her shoulders like a yoke. The straps cut off circulation to her arms, leaving her fingers numb inside her thermal gloves. She checked her wrist monitor. Oxygen saturation was at 86%. Borderline. Her heart rate, usually a slow, rhythmic drum, was fluttering erratically. The arrhythmia was waking up, aggravated by the exertion and the altitude. "Control it," she ordered herself. "Drop the pulse." But you couldn't drop your pulse when you were hauling 80 pounds up a 45-degree incline. "Viper, close the gap," Jones barked again. He was 20 meters ahead, moving with the terrifying endurance of a man who refused to acknowledge pain. "Copy," she wheezed, the words scraping her dry throat. She drove her ice axe into the slope, using it to haul her weight up over a jagged shelf of rock. Her muscles screamed. The team, Tex, Jones, and 2 others, were built for this. They were sledgehammers. She was a scalpel. And right now, the mountain required a sledgehammer. The wind picked up, a sudden gust that slammed into the cliff face, throwing a curtain of spindrift into their faces. Anna shielded her eyes, her balance wavering for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Her right crampon struck a patch of black ice beneath the snow. The metal spike skidded, finding no purchase. She didn't scream. She didn't have the breath for it. Her feet went out from under her, and gravity took over. She slid backward, her heavy pack twisting her torso violently. The world became a blur of white and gray rock. She clawed at the ice, but the momentum was too great. A drop of 300 feet waited below the shelf. A hand clamped onto her harness. The jerk was sudden and brutal, knocking the wind out of her. She swung, there for a terrifying moment, feet dangling over the abyss, held only by the iron grip of Captain Jones. He hauled her up. It wasn't a gentle assist. It was a heave of raw strength. He threw her onto the flat rock of the shelf, where she landed on her hands and knees, gasping for air that wasn't there. Jones stood over her, his chest heaving, his face a mask of fury behind his ballistic goggles. "I told you," he hissed, his voice low enough not to carry over the radio but loud enough to cut through the wind. "I told you that pack was too heavy. You nearly took us both off the mountain." Anna scrambled to her feet, shame flushing her cheeks, hot and stinging against the freezing wind. "I slipped. It was ice. Anyone could have—" "Tex didn't slip. I didn't slip," Jones interrupted, leaning into her space. "You are a liability, Kova. We have one click to the ridge. If you fall again, I'm cutting your line. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." Jones turned his back on her, signaling the team to move out. "Double time. We lost 5 minutes." Anna stood there for a second, trembling, not from fear, but from the humiliation that coated her like a second skin. She looked down at the spot where she had fallen. The black ice was scuffed where her crampon had failed. But as she stared at the ground, blinking away the spots in her vision, something caught her eye. To the left of the ice patch, tucked into the crevice of a rock formation that offered shelter from the wind, the snow was disturbed. Not by wind and not by her fall. The disturbance had a pattern, a rhythmic compression. She knelt, ignoring the ache in her knees. It was a faint depression, almost erased by the spindrift, but unmistakable to a trained eye. A boot print, but not a standard-issue NATO Vibram sole. This tread was different, lighter, with a distinctive chevron pattern. And there was something else, a tiny yellow discoloration in the snow next to it. Urine, frozen and old, maybe 6 hours. "Captain," Anna said into her comms. "Move your ass, Kova," Jones replied without looking back. "Captain, we have sign. 6 hours old. Flankers." Jones stopped. He turned slowly, looking down at her from 10 meters up the trail. "We monitored the satellite feeds all morning. This slope is clear. You're seeing shadows because you're hypoxic." "I see a tread pattern," Anna insisted, pointing at the rock. "Civilian footwear or irregular militia. They were waiting out the wind here." Jones didn't even come back to check. He checked his watch instead. The thermal sweep was negative. If they were here, they're gone. "We don't have time to chase ghosts, Sergeant. Get in formation. Rear guard." Anna stared at him, her hand gripping her rifle. She wanted to scream. She wanted to drag him down and shove his face into the frozen evidence. But that would get her court-martialed, and right now, she needed to be on that ridge. "Copy, rear guard," she said, her voice flat. She stood up and fell into line at the back of the formation. As she walked past the rock, she memorized the direction the footprint was pointing. It wasn't leading down the mountain. It was leading up, toward the ridge, parallel to their own path, but hidden in the blind spots of the terrain. They weren't just walking into an extraction zone. They were walking into a prepared stage. She checked her scope covers, ensuring they were tight. She checked the bolt of her rifle. Jones thought she was the weak link because she stumbled. He didn't understand that stumbling was the only way to see the ground up close. The wind howled louder as they neared the peak, a mournful sound that sounded less like weather and more like a warning. Anna lowered her head and marched, her heart rate finally steadying into the slow, cold rhythm of the hunt. The ridgeline was less a position of power and more a tomb of ice. They had dug in behind a natural berm of shale, draping white camouflage, netting over their forms until they were indistinguishable from the snowdrifts. Sergeant Kova lay prone, her body pressed into the frozen earth. She had ceased to be a person hours ago. She was now merely an extension of the M2010 rifle. Her heart rate was a steady 42 beats per minute. Below them, the valley floor was a cauldron of gray shadows. The wind had shifted, swirling snow into erratic vortexes that confused the eye. "Status," Captain Jones whispered over the comms. He was 5 meters to her left, monitoring the feed from the long-range thermal camera. "Visibility is degrading," Tex reported from the rear flank. "I've got intermittent interference on the thermal. The ice on the rocks is reflecting heat signatures. I'm seeing ghosts, Cap." "Filter it out," Jones snapped. The package is 2 minutes out. We need eyes on the exchange point. Anna didn't look at the thermal screen. She trusted glass over electronics. She pressed her eye to the Leupold Mark IV scope, dialing the magnification up to 20x. The world narrowed to a circle of white and gray. She scanned the valley floor, segment by segment, breathing in the rhythm of the wind. A convoy of 3 vehicles was approaching the rendezvous point, a cluster of abandoned mud brick huts. The HVT was supposed to be in the second vehicle. Target vehicles in sight, Jones confirmed. Watcher 1 to base. We have visual. Anna ignored the vehicles. Everyone looked at the vehicles. A sniper looked at what wasn't moving. She swept her scope up the opposing slope, scanning the jagged rocks that mirrored their own position. Nothing. Just snow and shale. Then a flicker. It wasn't heat. It was a texture change. A patch of snow that didn't crumble the way the wind should have made it crumble. It looked rigid. I have movement, Anna said softly. Sector 4, elevation 300 relative to the valley floor. Jones checked his monitor. Negative, Viper. Thermal is cold in Sector 4, just rocks. It's not thermal, Anna insisted, her finger hovering over the trigger guard. I saw a shift. Someone is under a thermal blanket. They're masking. You're seeing wind, Kova, Jones said, his voice tight with impatience. Focus on the convoy. We need to ID the HVT. Anna didn't shift her aim. She watched the rigid patch of snow. A goat herder wouldn't be hiding under a thermal blanket at 14,000 feet. A civilian wouldn't be perfectly still for the 20 minutes she had been watching that sector. Suddenly, the snow moved. A figure detached itself from the rocks, draped in heavy woolen rags. The figure began walking down a goat path toward the convoy, leaning heavily on a wooden staff. Civilian in the open, Jones called out. Tex, verify. Looks like a shepherd cap, Tex replied. No weapons visible, just a stick. He's moving into the kill zone, Anna said, her voice dropping an octave. Look at his gait, Captain. He's not limping. He's measuring his steps. He's an old man, Kova. Stand down. He is not leaning on that staff, Anna countered, her eye straining against the optic. He's carrying it like a load. It's too heavy for wood. Command says no engagement without PID, Jones barked. We are not shooting a civilian because you're jumpy. Maintain overwatch on the HVT. Anna felt the cold knot in her stomach tighten. The math didn't add up. The shepherd was now 50 meters from the lead vehicle. He stopped. He didn't wave. He didn't look at the trucks. He dropped the staff. It didn't clatter like wood. It hit the ground with a heavy metallic thud that she felt more than heard. The figure reached under his rags. Captain, he's engaging, Anna shouted, flipping her safety off. I said hold fire, Jones roared. That is a direct... The figure whipped a tube from beneath the robes. It wasn't a staff. It was the launch tube of an RPG-7, painted white. Anna squeezed the trigger. Crack. The rifle bucked into her shoulder. The suppressed shot a sharp hiss in the wind. But she was a fraction of a second too late. In the scope, she saw the backblast erupt from the tube just as her bullet struck the man in the chest. He crumpled, but the rocket was already airborne. It streaked across the valley floor, a trail of gray smoke slashing through the air, and impacted the lead vehicle of the convoy. Boom! The explosion tore the silence of the mountains apart. The truck flipped into the air, engulfed in a fireball that blinded the thermal sensors. Contact! Contact front! Jones screamed, the composure in his voice shattering instantly. They're everywhere. As if on cue, the empty ridge opposite them erupted with muzzle flashes. The snow she had been watching, the rocks that registered as cold on the thermal, came alive. Dozens of men threw off thermal blankets and opened fire. Bullets snapped over their heads, cracking like whips. The shale berm disintegrated under the impact of heavy machine gun fire. We're compromised, Tex yelled. They were waiting for us. Jones scrambled back, blood already trickling from a cut on his forehead where a rock fragment had hit him. He looked at Anna, his eyes wide with shock and the dawning realization of his error. How did you know? He gasped, fumbling for his radio. Anna racked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing. It spun into the snow, steaming hot. Because, she whispered, settling the crosshairs on the next muzzle flash, I know what it looks like to hide. The mountain did not just echo the sound of war, it amplified it. The return fire from the opposing ridge was a wall of noise, a physical pressure that hammered against the chest. Rounds slapped into the shale berm, showering Anna in razor-sharp fragments of stone. "Suppressing! Lay it down!" Jones screamed, his voice barely audible over the roar of Tex's MK-48 machine gun. Anna didn't fire blindly. She couldn't afford to. She had 3 magazines of 300 Win Mag remaining. Every shot had to be a transaction. 1 bullet, 1 kill. She cycled the bolt, inhaling sharply as she acquired a target. A gunner setting up a PKM on a rocky outcrop. Breathe. Squeeze. The recoil punched her shoulder. The gunner dropped. "Mortars!" Tex bellowed. "Incoming! Get down!" The warning came 2 seconds too late. A high-pitched whistle tore through the air, followed instantly by a concussive thump 10 meters to their right. The ground heaved. A plume of black smoke and dirty snow erupted, blinding them. Anna felt the shock wave rattle her teeth. She shook her head, clearing the debris from her scope. "Jones is down! The cap is down!" She looked to her left. Captain Jones was writhing on the ground, clutching his thigh. The snow beneath him was turning a bright, arterial red. A piece of shrapnel from the mortar had bypassed his plate carrier's lower guard. "Get smoke out! Pop smoke!" Tex was dragging Jones by the drag handle of his vest, his face contorted with effort and panic. "Viper, cover us! We need to move!" Anna looked back at the enemy ridge. The mortar fire was walking it in. Thump, thump, getting closer. They were bracketing the position. If the team moved now, they would be cut down by the machine guns. If they stayed, the mortars would turn them into pink mist. She needed to kill the mortar team, but they were in defilade, hidden behind a rock wall on the far slope. She couldn't see them. She stopped shooting. "Viper, fire your weapon!" Tex screamed, throwing a purple smoke grenade. The hiss of the canister releasing its payload added to the chaos. Anna ignored him. She stared at the sky. She watched the gray streak of the next mortar shell arc over the ridge. Parabola, she thought. Vertex at roughly 200 feet. Angle of descent steep. Wind drift. She closed her eyes for a split second, visualizing the trajectory in reverse. To hit the mortar crew, she didn't need to see them. She needed to shoot. Through the snowbank they were hiding behind, but she had to time it perfectly with the wind gust to carry the bullet around the rock face. She lay perfectly still, her rifle pointed at a blank wall of snow. "Kova, move!" Jones gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "That's an order. Retreat." Anna didn't move. She was a statue. She was waiting for the wind speed to drop from 20 knots to 12. "She's frozen!" One of the other operators yelled, grabbing Tex's shoulder. "She's in shock. We have to go." "Leave her!" Jones choked out, the pain overriding his logic. "She's compromised. Get the team out. Go!" Tex looked at Anna. She was staring blankly through her scope, finger resting on the trigger, not firing. To him, it looked like the classic 1,000-yard stare. The lights were on, but nobody was home. "Damn it, Anna!" Tex threw a final smoke canister directly at her feet to obscure her from the enemy, a mercy gesture. "Fall back to Zulu. Move or die!" The team scrambled, backward, dragging Jones through the thick purple haze. They vanished over the crest of the ridge, their boots crunching frantically on the ice. Anna was alone. The smoke swirled around her, tasting of sulfur. The enemy fire concentrated on the retreating team, the bullets zipping high over her head. She watched the Kestrel wind meter mounted on her rail. 18 knots, 15 knots, 12 knots. "Now," she whispered. She adjusted her elevation turret 3 clicks up. She aimed not at a person, but at a specific jagged rock above the enemy position. She wasn't shooting the rock. She was banking the shot, calculating that the bullet would graze the stone, destabilize, and tumble into the soft snow behind it, where the heat signatures were clustered. It was a shot that shouldn't exist. She squeezed the trigger. Crack. She didn't see the impact. But 4 seconds later, a secondary explosion erupted on the enemy ridge. Her round had likely struck the mortar shells or the propellant. A fireball blossomed from behind the rocks, silencing the enemy battery instantly. Anna exhaled, her breath fogging the scope. "Target neutralized," she said to the empty air. She keyed her radio. "Captain, mortars are down. I am clear." Static. "Captain Jones?" Tex? Nothing but the hiss of white noise. She looked behind her. The ridge was empty. The snow was churned up where they had dragged Jones. They were gone. They had left her. She sat up slowly, the realization settling over her, like the frost on her jacket. They hadn't left her out of malice. They had left her because they thought she was broken. They thought she was just a girl who froze when the loud noises started. Anna checked her magazine. 2 rounds left. She stood up in the purple haze, invisible to the world. She wasn't Sergeant Kova anymore. The liability was gone. She turned her radio off. Now she was just the ghost. When the silence that followed the explosion was heavier than the noise itself, it pressed down on the mountain, a suffocating blanket of white quiet. Anna lay motionless in the depression she had dug, the purple smoke from the grenade finally dissipating into the gray sky. Her ears were still ringing, a high-pitched whine that masked the subtle crunch of approaching boots. But she felt them, vibrations in the ice, transmitted through her chest plate. They were coming. She checked the chamber of her M2010. 1 round. She had 2 spare magazines in her vest, but reloading now would make noise. Metal on metal clicked like a beacon in this acoustic amphitheater. "Move!" her training screamed. "Shoot and move!" But movement was death. The enemy sweep team was fan-shaped, moving up the slope with overlapping fields of fire. If she stood up to run, she would be skylined against the white backdrop. She would be a black silhouette for 20 rifles. She did the opposite of what panic dictated. She sank lower. Anna rolled onto her back, sliding into a narrow fissure between 2 slabs of granite. It was a space so tight it would have crushed Tex or Jones. Her ribs scraped against the rock, the cold instantly biting through her thermal layers. She reached up and pulled a shelf of loose snow down over her legs, then her torso. She left only a small aperture for her face, covering it with the white scrim of her shema. Breathe shallow. Don't melt the snow. The vibrations grew stronger. Voices drifted downwind. They were speaking Pashto, fast and angry. They were looking for the mortar team she had obliterated, and they were looking for the sniper who had fired the shot. Her earpiece crackled. The sound was explosive in her ear canal. "Viper, report." It was Jones. His voice was wet, gurgling. He was losing blood fast. The signal was weak, breaking up over the granite interference. "Kova, if you can hear this, pull back to Zulu. We can't wait." Anna's hand hovered over the transmit button. If she answered, she could give them her coordinates. They might try to come back. They would turn around, walk right into the ambush that was currently stepping over her position, and they would all die. "Anna," Jones's voice cracked, stripped of rank and protocol, "don't be a hero. Just run." He thought she was scared. He thought she was cowering behind a rock, paralyzed by the shock of combat. He was trying to give her permission to save herself because he believed she was too weak to save them. A tear leaked from her eye, hot and salty. It froze halfway down her cheek. She didn't press transmit. Instead, she reached up to her helmet rail. With trembling fingers, she found the connection jack for the comms unit. Click. She pulled the plug. The static died. Jones's voice vanished. Now there was only the wind. A boot crunched down 6 inches from her head. Anna stopped breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She focused on her arrhythmia, willing the muscle to skip, to slow, to die down. "I am a rock. I am ice. I am nothing." The enemy soldier stopped. He was so close she could smell him. Unwashed wool, tobacco, and gun oil. He poked the snow near her shoulder with the barrel of his AK-47. The metal muzzle missed her arm by an inch, sinking into the powder. He shouted something to his comrade. A laugh answered him. They were relaxed. They thought they had won. They thought the Americans were routed, fleeing down the valley like frightened dogs. The soldier turned, his boot kicking snow into her face. He walked on. Anna lay there for what felt like an eternity. She counted the seconds. 100, 200. The voices faded. The vibrations ceased. She was alone in the void. Slowly, carefully, she pushed the snow away from her face. The sky was darkening. Night was falling. bringing with it a temperature drop that would kill an exposed man in 3 hours. But she wasn't a man, and she wasn't exposed. She sat up, the snow cascading off her ghillie suit like a shed skin. She checked her rifle again. The cold had stiffened the action, but it would fire. She looked down into the valley. She could see the faint heat signatures of her team retreating miles away, limping toward the extraction point that was likely compromised. And closer, much closer, she saw the enemy campfires flickering in the twilight. They were celebrating. They were warming their hands, eating their food, secure in the knowledge that the threat was gone. Anna reached into her pack and pulled out a protein bar. She ate it slowly, staring at the fires. Jones had ordered her to run. The military code required her to regroup, but the logic of the battlefield dictated something else. The enemy was between her and her team. To get to safety, she had to go through them. She stood up, her small figure swallowed by the vastness of the Karakoram. She didn't put her earpiece back in. She didn't need orders anymore. "I'm not running, Captain," she whispered to the wind. She shouldered her rifle and turned not toward the retreat path, but toward the smoke of the enemy camp. The hunt had begun. Night did not fall in the Karakoram. It rose from the valley floor like a black tide, swallowing the peaks one by one. For Anna, the darkness was an ally. It leveled the playing field. She moved through the tree line, a ghost in the literal sense. She wasn't walking. She was flowing. Every placement of her foot was calculated to avoid the snap of a twig or the crunch of dry ice. She had shed her heavy ruck, burying it under a snow drift to mark for later recovery. Now she carried only her rifle, her knife, and the ammunition. She was light. She was fast. Ahead, the flicker of a cigarette lighter broke the gloom. Anna froze, her body sinking into the deep powder until only her eyes remained above the surface. 2 men, forward scouts. They were moving casually, their weapons slung over their shoulders. They were laughing, their voices carrying easily in the thin air. They were tracking the drag marks left by Captain Jones's body, assuming the Americans were fleeing in a panic. They didn't know they were being hunted from behind. Anna analyzed the geometry of the engagement. 2 targets, 10 meters apart. If she shot one, the other would radio the main force before she could cycle the bolt. It had to be silent. She watched them. The taller man, the one smoking, stopped to adjust his boot. The other continued walking, creating a gap of 20 meters. Now, Anna moved. She didn't run. She scrambled on all fours like a spider, keeping her profile below the height of the scrub brush. She closed the distance to the smoker, approaching from his blind spot, the 6 o'clock position directly behind him. The man stood up, stomping his boot to get the blood flowing. He took a drag of his cigarette, the cherry glowing bright red. Anna rose from the snow. She didn't reach for his neck. He was 6 feet tall. She was 5'3". She couldn't overpower him. Instead, she kicked the back of his knee. The joint buckled. As he collapsed backward, surprised but not yet screaming, Anna stepped in. She didn't fight his weight. She guided it. She wrapped her left arm around his face, covering his mouth and nose, while her right hand drove her combat knife into the soft tissue just below his ear. It wasn't a slash. It was a puncture, targeted, clinical. The man thrashed, his heavy boots kicking up plumes of snow. He was strong, immensely so. If he could get a grip on her, he would crush her. But Anna was already gone, twisting her body behind his, using her legs to hook his waist and drag him down into the powder. She held him there, feeling the frantic, jerky rhythms of his dying struggle against her chest. She didn't feel revulsion. She didn't feel triumph. She felt only the vibration of physics, energy transferring from potential to kinetic to static. The thrashing stopped. The heat from his wound began to melt the snow beneath them, the smell of copper and iron rising in the cold air. Anna waited 10 seconds to ensure neural shutdown. Then she released him. She rolled the body over. His eyes were open, staring up at the stars he would never see again. She patted down his vest, her fingers moving quickly. She found a map, a handful of dried apricots, and, most importantly, a Motorola handheld radio. She took the radio and crawled backward, retreating into the shadows of a rock overhang. The second scout was calling out now. "Hassan! Hassan! The voice was annoyed, not panicked, yet. Anna pressed herself into the fissure of the rock. She watched the second man walk back toward his fallen comrade. He saw the dark shape in the snow. He saw the steam rising. Hassan! He unslung his rifle, stepping closer. Anna didn't move to kill him. Not yet. She needed to know who commanded them. She watched as the second scout knelt by the body, realizing what had happened. He didn't scream. He grabbed his radio. Anna turned the volume on her stolen unit to the lowest setting and held it to her ear. Wolf Actual, this is Scout 2, the man whispered, his voice trembling. Hassan is down. Knife kill. It's professional, sir. A voice crackled back. It was deep, calm, and sounded like gravel grinding on glass. Did you hear a shot? Negative. No shot. Then it is not the Americans. The voice, the wolf, replied. Americans are loud. Americans break things. This is something else. What do I do? Leave the body. Hold position. I am looking through the glass now. Anna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The wolf, the enemy sniper. He was watching. She looked at her own hands. They were small, gloved, and stained with the blood of a man twice her size. Jones had said she couldn't carry the weight of war. He was wrong. You didn't have to carry the enemy to kill them. You just had to bring them down to your level. She clipped the radio to her vest. The second scout was now a fixed point, terrified and static. He wasn't a threat anymore. He was bait. Anna checked her knife. It was clean enough. She slid it back into the sheath. She wasn't just a sniper anymore. She was the thing in the dark that the Americans were afraid of, turned against the very men who hunted them. She began to move again, circling wide, heading toward the voice on the radio, toward the wolf. The stolen Motorola radio felt heavy in Anna's hand, a black brick of plastic that bridged the gap between life and death. She had wedged herself into a narrow fissure of the rock face, 400 meters downwind from where she had killed the scout. She pressed the single earpiece into her auditory canal, sealing it with a layer of wool from her scarf to prevent sound leakage. The channel was alive. Captain Jones, the voice purred. It was the same voice she had heard earlier, deep, accented, and terrifyingly calm. I can hear the air bubbling in your chest. Your medic is wasting gauze. The artery is nicked, yes? Anna closed her eyes. The wolf was on the American frequency. He must have scavenged a radio from the initial ambush site, or perhaps he had cracked their encryption days ago. Go to hell, Jones's voice came back, faint and wet. He sounded delirious. Tex, keep moving. Don't listen. I am not chasing you, Captain, the wolf continued. I am merely walking behind you, waiting for the cold to finish what I started. You are leaving a trail of blood that shines like a highway in my night vision. Anna checked the signal strength meter on the display. Full bars. He was close. But close in these mountains could mean 500 meters or 2 kilometers. The signal bounced off the canyon walls, making simple triangulation impossible without movement. She needed him to look for her. She needed him to narrow his focus. She remembered Jones's words in the hangar. You're too small. You're a liability. She remembered the way the men looked at her. Not with malice, but with a protective condescension. They saw a girl who needed saving. The wolf would see the same thing. Anna took a breath. She manipulated her vocal cords, pitching her voice higher, letting the tremor of the cold bleed into the tone. She didn't have to fake the shivering. The temperature was 20 below zero. She keyed the mic. Captain, she whispered. Captain Jones, please. The frequency went dead silent. The wolf stopped talking. Jones stopped groaning. Anna? Jones's voice was a ghost. Viper. Maintain silence. Get off the net. I'm lost, Anna sobbed into the mic. She injected panic into every syllable, the breathless, hyperventilating rhythm of a soldier who has broken. I can't find the track. It's so cold. I think I'm bleeding. Please come back. She released the button. She waited. Kova, listen to me, Jones rasped, desperation cutting through his pain. Do not transmit. He is listening. Stay hidden. Then the third voice cut in. The wolf. The little bird is left behind? The amusement in his voice was thick. The captain leaves the woman to die? How? American. Anna's hand tightened on the radio, her knuckles white. Come on, take the bait. I don't want to die, she whimpered into the radio. I can see the lights. Down the valley. Are those friendly? Which lights, little bird? The wolf asked softly. Tell me what you see. He was triangulating. He was trying to figure out her line of sight to determine her position. The two fires, Anna lied. Near the big ridge. The one shaped like a saddle. Ah, the wolf said. The saddle. You are high up. Anna scanned the ridgeline opposite her position. If he believed she was looking at the saddle, he would turn his optics toward the northern slope. He would have to shift. He would have to move his rifle. She raised the M10. She wasn't looking at the saddle. She was looking for the movement of a sniper reacting to information. It's so cold, she whispered again, letting the sob catch in her throat. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to wave. Please don't shoot. Stand up, the wolf encouraged. I will see you. I will bring you warmth. It was a predator luring a child. It was vile. It was perfect. Anna scanned the dark gray cliffs across the chasm. Nothing. Nothing. Then a flicker. It wasn't a muzzle flash. It was a reflection. A tiny, momentary glint of moonlight bouncing off an objective lens as the rifle traversed from the valley floor up toward the northern peaks. Sector 7, a cluster of jagged rocks that looked like a broken jaw. The wolf had shifted his gaze to look for the scared girl. In doing so, he had exposed his hide. Do you see me? Anna asked, her voice trembling. Not yet, the wolf replied. Stand taller. Anna dropped the radio into the snow. The act was over. Her face hardened, the fear evaporating instantly, replaced by the cold calculation of the ghost. She had him. He was 2,400 meters away. A difficult shot, a nearly impossible shot in this wind. But she knew where he was, and he was looking the wrong way, searching for a phantom liability while the real threat dialed in the elevation. I see you, she whispered to herself, not the radio. She settled behind the rifle. The game of cat and mouse was over. Now it was just math. 2,430 meters. Anna stared at the number on her laser rangefinder. It was an abstract figure, a distance that belonged to artillery, not a rifle. At this range, the .300 Winchester Magnum bullet would be in the air for nearly 4 seconds. It would drop over 150 feet. It would transition from supersonic to subsonic speed, destabilizing as it broke the sound barrier in reverse. She was asking a piece of lead to perform a miracle. The wolf was still, scanning the northern ridge, his scope glinting intermittently in the moonlight. He was patient. He was comfortable. He thought he was hunting a frightened child. Anna adjusted her turret. Click, click, click. She ran out of elevation adjustment. The scope physically couldn't dial the distance. She would have to hold over, aiming at a point of empty air high above his head, trusting gravity to pull the bullet down into the target. She shifted her body, trying to settle the rifle into the groove of the rock. She couldn't. A slab of granite, pushed up by centuries of geological violence, blocked the muzzle's clear path to the lower valley. From the prone position, the only stable, safe position for a sniper, she was blind. To take the shot, she had to clear the obstruction. To clear the obstruction, she had to rise. Command, tell Jones to keep his head down, Anna whispered, her voice barely registering over the gale. It wasn't a transmission. The radio was on the ground. It was a prayer. She slowly pushed herself up, first to her knees, then planting her boots firmly on the slick rock, she stood. She was now a silhouette against the stars, a black cutout on a white mountain. If the wolf turned his head 10 degrees to the left, he would see her. He wouldn't even need his scope. She was violating the first, second, and third rules of survival. Math changes when you're the variable. She engaged the lock on her tripod, resting the heavy rifle atop the granite slab that had blocked her view. She leaned into the stock, pressing her cheek against the cold polymer. The wind was screaming. 40 knots, full value from left to right. She closed her eyes for a second, visualizing the air. It wasn't empty space. It was a fluid, thick, turbulent, and heavy. She had to thread a needle through a hurricane. Coriolis effect, she thought. The Earth will rotate underneath the bullet while it flies. At this latitude, shooting south, drift right. Spin drift, she added. The bullet spins right, drifting right. Wind, she calculated, pushing right. Everything was pushing right. She had to aim so far left it felt insane. She had to aim at a completely different mountain peak. She opened her eyes. The crosshair settled. Her heart began its familiar descent. Thump, thump. The arrhythmia flared, a flutter in her chest. She welcomed it. She waited for the pause between the chaotic beats, that long, silent gap where the body stood still. The wolf was still looking north. He was waiting for the girl to wave. "Here I am," she breathed. She didn't pull the trigger. She squeezed it, a pressure so gradual it surprised her when the mechanism broke. Crack! The rifle roared, a flash of fire illuminating the ridge. The recoil was violent in her standing position. It slammed into her shoulder, throwing her balance off. She stumbled backward, her boots slipping on the ice. But her eyes never left the glass. 1 second. The bullet was screaming through the upper atmosphere. 2 seconds. It was dropping, shedding velocity, fighting the wind. 3 seconds. It went subsonic, wobbling slightly as the shockwave collapsed around it. 4 seconds. In the scope, she saw the result. There was no cinematic explosion. There was just a sudden, violent jerk of the target. The wolf's head snapped back. The heat signature on the thermal overlay didn't disappear. It slumped. The rifle he was holding clattered onto the rocks below his perch. A hit. A center mass impact at 1.5 miles, fired from a standing position in a blizzard. But the physics of the shot demanded a price. The muzzle flash had been a beacon. Before Anna could recover her balance, the air around her shattered. Snap hiss. A bullet from one of the alert perimeter guards, or perhaps a second sniper she hadn't seen, whipped past her ear. Then another. This time the rock in front of her exploded, showering her face with stone shrapnel. The enemy knew where she was. The entire mountainside erupted in return fire. Anna didn't dive. She fell. The recoil and the surprise of the incoming fire sent her toppling backward off the shelf, landing hard in the snow. She gasped, the wind knocked out of her. She grabbed the rifle instinctively. She had killed the voice in the dark. But now the mountain was awake, and it was screaming for her blood. The mountain did not forgive the violence. It reacted to it. Anna scrambled on her hands and knees, the snow around her erupting in geysers of ice and dirt. The enemy force below, enraged by the death of their leader, had abandoned all tactical restraint. They were no longer aiming. They were saturating the grid square. An RPG warhead struck the granite shelf she had just vacated, sending a shockwave through the ground that lifted her off her chest. She slammed back down, the air forced from her lungs. Shrapnel pinged off her ballistic plate, a terrifying hail of steel rain. "Move!" she rasped, dragging herself toward the lee side of a boulder. But there was nowhere to go. To the left was a sheer drop. To the right, the exposed ridge was being chewed apart by 12.7 millimeter machine gun fire. She was pinned, a rat trapped in a barrel, while giants hammered on the outside. Then the shooting stopped. It wasn't a tactical pause. It was confusion. Below her, the shouting of the soldiers changed pitch. The anger turned to something else, something frantic. Anna felt it before she heard it. A low-frequency vibration that hummed through the bedrock, rattling her teeth. It sounded like the earth itself was groaning. Crack. The sound was louder than the sniper shot. It was the sound of a structural failure on a geological scale. Anna looked up. 300 meters above her position, the massive cornice of snow that hung over the ridge, a buildup of weeks of blizzards, had fractured. The sonic boom of her 300 Win Mag, combined with the concussive blasts of the RPGs, had severed the friction bond holding the snowpack to the mountain. The white shelf detached. "Oh," Anna whispered. It didn't fall fast at first. It slumped like a heavy blanket sliding off a bed. Then gravity took hold. Millions of tons of ice and snow transformed from a solid into a liquid, accelerating with terrifying speed. The enemy soldiers below began to scream. They turned to run, but you cannot outrun a white tidal wave moving at 80 miles per hour. Anna didn't run. She knew the physics. She was in the direct path. She curled into a ball, tucking her knees to her chest. She grabbed the collar of her jacket and pulled it over her face to create a filtration pocket. She didn't pray. She didn't think of home. She thought of the protocol. Swim. Keep the head up. Create space. The roar hit her. It was a deafening white noise that erased all other senses. The impact was like being hit by a freight train made of concrete. Anna was torn from her cover and thrown into the churning maelstrom. There was no up or down. There was only the crushing pressure and the violent tumbling. She fought. She thrashed her arms and legs, trying to swim toward the surface of the slide, fighting the immense weight that tried to drag her down into the darkness. Her rifle was ripped from her grip, the sling snapping like thread. Her pack was gone. The world was a washing machine of ice blocks and pulverized snow. Her helmet smashed against a rock, ringing like a bell, but stayed on. She couldn't breathe. Every time she tried to inhale, the fine powder forced its way into her nose and mouth, a dry drowning. Don't pass out. Fight the sleep. She tumbled over a cliff edge within the slide, falling through the air for a weightless second before slamming back into the flow. Her leg twisted violently, a rib cracked, and then, as quickly as it had begun, the motion stopped. The concrete set. The snow, agitated by the movement, instantly froze into a solid mass as it settled. Anna was entombed. She couldn't move her arms. She couldn't move her legs. The weight pressing on her chest was immense, restricting her breath to shallow, panicked sips. She opened her eyes. Darkness. Absolute, pitch-black darkness. Panic kills, the voice in her head recited. Panic burns oxygen. She wiggled her fingers. Her right hand was near her face. She managed to scrape a few inches of space in front of her nose and mouth. An air pocket. It wasn't much. Maybe 10 minutes of air. Maybe less. She was buried alive. 2 miles away, Rally Point, Zulu. Captain Jones leaned against a rock, watching the thermal feed on Tex's datapad. He was pale, his leg tourniquets soaked through, but his eyes were glued to the screen. I lost her signal, Tex said, his voice hollow. Comm link is severed. Jones looked up at the mountain. The moon had broken through the clouds, illuminating the aftermath. Where the enemy camp had been, there was nothing. No fires, no trucks, no soldiers. Just a smooth, pristine field of white debris stretching for a mile down the valley floor. The topography of the map had been rewritten in seconds. The whole face came down, the medic whispered, staring in horror. Nothing could survive that. Jones stared at the white scar on the mountain. He remembered the small woman in the hangar, the one he had mocked for being too light, too fragile, the one who had stood up when everyone else ran. She didn't run, Jones said, his voice breaking. Sir? She didn't run, Jones repeated, gripping the rock until his knuckles turned white. We ran. She stayed. She brought the damn mountain down on them. We need to call in the extract, Cap, Tex said gently. The bird is 5 minutes out. We have to go. Jones turned to look at his men. They were battered, bleeding, and alive. Alive because of the ghost. We are not leaving, Jones said. The command was weak in volume, but iron in intent. Cap, the area is unstable. We can't... I said we are not leaving, Jones shouted, struggling to stand on his good leg. He pointed at the debris field. Get the thermal drones in the air. We scan every inch of that slide. If there is a heartbeat under that ice, we find it. Sir, the odds... I don't care about the odds, Jones snarled, tears mixing with the grime on his face. She calculated the odds and she bet on us. Now we bet on her. Deploy the drones. The team moved, not with the sluggishness of defeat, but with a frantic purpose. Under the snow, deep in the silence, Anna Kova's heartbeat. Thump, pause, thump, slow, steady, waiting. The rotor wash of the MH-60 Black Hawk whipped the loose snow into a blinding frenzy, but the noise was distant to Captain Jones. He sat on the edge of the open cargo door, his injured legs stretched out before him, refusing the medic's attempts to strap him in. His eyes were locked on the tablet screen held by Tex. Battery is at 10%, Cap, Tex shouted over. The turbine whined. The drone can't stay up much longer. Keep it in the air, Jones ordered, his voice cracking. Grid 3-4. Check the depression near the tree line. The thermal feed was a monochromatic nightmare of gray and black. The avalanche had buried everything under 10 feet of concrete hard ice. The enemy bodies were gone. The trucks were gone. The heat signatures of the dying fires had been extinguished hours ago. "Sir?" The pilot's voice crackled in Jones's headset. "We are bingo on fuel. I cannot hold this hover. We have to RTB, now." Jones keyed his mic, ready to scream, ready to threaten, ready to court-martial the entire aviation wing if it meant buying 5 more minutes. But Tex grabbed his shoulder. "Cap, look." Jones looked down at the screen. In the center of a sea of cold blue-black, there was a tiny, faint smudge of gray. It wasn't a bright white bloom of body heat. It was barely warmer than the surrounding ice. It pulsed. Once. Then silence for 10 seconds. Then again. "It's a glitch," the medic said, shaking his head. "No human heart beats that slow. That's 12 beats per minute." Jones remembered the briefing. He remembered the medical file he had thrown onto the desk in disgust. Cardiac arrhythmia, bradycardia. "That's her," Jones whispered. "Set it down. Get us on the ground." The chopper banked hard, skids smashing onto the uneven surface of the debris field. Before the weight settled, Jones was limping out, dragging his bad leg through the snow. Tex and the medic sprinted ahead, shovels in hand. They dug like madmen. The snow was packed tight, requiring them to hack at it with ice axes. They went down 3 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet. Tex's shovel hit something soft. "I've got a boot." They cleared the snow frantically with their gloved hands. Slowly, the form of Sergeant Anna Kova emerged from the ice. She was curled into a fetal ball, her face covered by her jacket. She was blue. Her skin was waxy and hard to the touch. The medic pressed 2 fingers to her carotid artery. He waited and waited. "She's gone, Cap," the medic said softly. "Hypothermia. She's frozen solid." "She is not gone," Jones snarled. He grabbed Anna's vest and hauled her small, rigid body out of the hole, cradling her against his chest. "She's a ghost. She knows how to do this. Get her on the bird." They loaded her onto the stretcher. As they lifted her, Jones saw it, clutched tightly in her frozen right hand. The knuckles white and locked in a death grip was the bolt of her rifle. The rest of the weapon had been sheared off by the avalanche, but she had refused to let go of the action. The flight back to Bagram was a blur of frantic activity. They cut away her gear. They wrapped her in thermal blankets. They pumped warmed fluids into her veins. Jones watched the cardiac monitor. It was a flat line. "Come on," he pleaded, staring at her pale face. "Don't you dare quit on me now. Do the math, Kova. Calculate. The odds." A minute passed. 2. Beep. The spike on the green line was weak, but it was there. The medic gasped. "I have a rhythm. It's accelerating. Her core temp is rising." Jones slumped back against the bulkhead, the adrenaline finally leaving him, replaced by a wave of exhaustion so profound he could barely keep his eyes open. He watched the chest of the liability rise and fall. She wasn't weak. She was the strongest thing on that mountain. 48 hours later, Bagram Field Hospital. The room smelled of iodine and floor wax. The hum of the air conditioning was a constant, soothing drone compared to the wind of the Karakoram. Captain Jones stood at the foot of the bed, leaning heavily on a crutch. His leg was wrapped in a cast, shrapnel wounds stitched and bandaged. Anna sat up in the bed. She looked smaller without the armor, almost fragile in the oversized hospital gown. Her face was still pale, touched with the pink of frostburn on her cheeks, but her eyes were clear, sharp. "They tell me you're being discharged tomorrow," Jones said, breaking the silence. "Yes, sir," Anna replied. Her voice was raspy, damaged by the cold air. "Minor tissue damage. Nothing permanent." Jones looked down at his hands. He had rehearsed a speech. He wanted to apologize for the hangar. He wanted to thank her for the mortar shot, for the radio bait, for the avalanche. He wanted to tell her that he had been wrong about everything. But looking at her, he realized she didn't want his apology. It would be an admission that his doubt had mattered to her. And he realized now that it never had. She hadn't fought to prove him wrong. She had fought because it was her job. "We recovered the team," Jones said instead. "Everyone made it. Because of you. Anna nodded once, acknowledging the data point. I put in the recommendation, Jones continued. Distinguished Service Cross. Command is processing it. Anna shifted slightly, wincing as her bruised ribs protested. She looked at Jones, her gray eyes unreadable. Thank you, Captain. Jones hesitated. Is there anything you need? Anything I can get you? Anna looked past him, toward the corner of the room where her personal effects were stacked in a clear plastic bag. She looked at the empty space where a long, black case should have been. My rifle, sir, she said softly. The barrel was destroyed in the slide. I need a requisition form for a new M2010 barrel and receiver group. Jones blinked. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. She had nearly died. She had brought down a mountain, and her only concern was the hardware. I'll have it on your bunk by morning, Jones promised. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Rest up, Viper. We have a new deployment cycle in 2 weeks. Captain? Jones turned back. The wind calculation for the avalanche, Anna said, her face deadpan. I didn't account for the secondary shelf. It was messy. Jones smiled, a genuine expression of respect. It worked, Kova. That's all that matters. No, sir, she corrected him, closing her eyes as she leaned back into the pillow. The math matters. Next time, I'll be precise. Jones walked out into the hallway, the sound of the hospital fading behind him. He knew one thing for certain. He would never call her weak again. He would just call her when he needed a miracle.